Welcome everyone, Costin here with my campaign overview guide for Settra the Imperishable of the Tomb Kings in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. The Tomb Kings are a powerful race that have a slow start, but once they get going, they can steamroll the map. So every single one of their campaigns can start out a bit slow, with the exception of Archon the Black, but it ramps up as you get more armies, as you unlock more research, as you get access to more units. So they have free recruitment, but they do have unit caps. To increase the amount of units you can recruit, you need to build structures, like for instance open graves, to be able to get 2 Nehekara warriors in this particular campaign. That's just an example over here. And then when it comes to armies, because those are capped too, and every single one of them with the exception of Archon starts only with 1 army, you need to unlock dynasties. So like the 2nd dynasty, 1st dynasty, 3rd dynasty, etc. Then there's also some research over here that also gives you more army capacity, as well as the mortuary cult, where you can spend canopic jars, which you can earn in battles as opposed by all option, and gold to increase your army capacity. All of this means you're going to be very slow early on in the game, but once you get those armies, once you get those units, you're pretty much nigh on unstoppable. The problem, of course, is the limitations that having only 1 army creates in your campaign. And this is especially true for Settra, because he has a very rough starting position, though it is better now that Creative Assembly has removed a lot of the minor settlement battles and made settlement battles, instead the vast majority of them, open field battles. So Settra is going to have a better campaign situation to deal with. It's going to be a lot easier to manage that and to get powerful, but it's still going to be a problem playing his campaign. Let's go over it. So faction-wide benefits: he gets allegiance points gained, minus 50% from alliances with Tomb Kings. This is a completely pointless benefit, and the reason it's so pointless is that, with perhaps the exception of Khalida over here, you're not going to want alliances with any of the other Tomb King factions. The reason is that in order to win the campaign, you need to get the Great Pyramid. So if we look at the victory conditions, for long campaign victory conditions, you need to ensure all the pyramids of the various Tomb Kings have been constructed, which means you need to take all of the territory of Khemri in order to achieve that. So everything that's here in the desert needs to be conquered, which means making deals with, say, for instance, the dynasty over here that controls the Crackland is not really in your interest when it comes down to it. Also, because you can't confederate with other Tomb Kings lords, which creates certainly creates problems in your campaign. I mean, you could ally Khalida, you could ally Katep if you were to encounter him, but yeah, that benefit is pretty damn pointless. Construction time for all buildings, -1, minimum of -1 turn. That is a pretty useful one, because otherwise structures can take a pretty decent amount of time. And this construction time is actually a fairly substantial benefit for the Tomb Kings, because it means you can get units much faster than anyone else, because you increase your unit capacity faster. Ergo, you can get units faster during the course of your campaign. Beyond that, when we're looking at Settra's skills, he does get Great King of Nehekara, so he gets 10% casualty replenishment rate, as well as 1 local recruitment capacity and leadership aura. So a pretty nice lord effect there. Then he gets hero crew rank for Tomb Princes, unyielding will, so melee defense, melee attack for units in range, control to all provinces, minus control in local enemy province recruit rank for his army, hero capacity for Tomb Princes, and hero crew rank. So you're looking at +4 to Tomb Princes recruit rank. Then you can get unit capacity for Tomb Guards and Tomb Guards with halberds, as well as skeleton chariots and archer chariots. Then melee attack for those units as well. Speed for his army, charge bonus for his army, as well as physical resistance. Settra is quite powerful when it comes to his own army. When it comes to battles, like if you get the Khemrian War Sphinx or the Chariots of the Gods, depends on the situation. The War Sphinx is probably much better in a siege. The Chariot might be better in an open field battle, but Settra is certainly pretty strong. His magic isn't great, but you shouldn't focus on his magic. You should get his melee skill line, and he will be able to go toe-to-toe with quite a lot of lords if you do so. That's the good part of his campaign, and he certainly has a lot of late game potential. I mean, he can get a gold mine here at tier 2. In fact, one of the things you could do is just get the mortuary house so you can start growing this element very, very quickly, because that's 25 extra growth that you're going to get for Camry. Once you get to tier 2, you can also get the crypt barracks to give you Nehekaran warriors and more tomb guard. Though, bear in mind, you do start with some tomb guard over here, so you're only really going to necessarily increase the Nehekaran warrior capacity. That's the good side of things. Let's talk about the bad. You're surrounded by enemies, and these are not necessarily easy enemies to deal with. So to the north you have Skarbrand, which most certainly is going to be a threat at some point or another. And the problem is Skarbrand can threaten Numas especially, which you don't want to lose because you want to take control over this entire province for the economic and army benefits, as well as getting commandments. So if Skarbrand raises Numas to the ground, you're in trouble. I mean, Qatar and the Springs of the Eternal Life are fairly secure, but here's the problem. It's fairly easy for you to deal with Numas and to take Qatar, but the problem is the vampire counts here in the Springs of Eternal Life are likely going to throw a full stack against you. That is going to be a issue in the early game. And then, of course, you've got the issues of Manfred, Volkmar to a lesser extent, and then Forik, all of which likely will declare war on you. Well, Forik less so, but Manfred for certain. And even if he doesn't declare war on you, you want to wipe out Manfred. And you're doing all of this with the limitation of only being able to have one army. That is the problem. It's not that, oh, it's so difficult to deal with these foes. No, it's difficult to deal with them when you're limited to one army, when the factions you're fighting are likely going to bring two. Like, if you leave Manfred alone for long enough, he's going to throw 2 full stacks at you. They might only be skeletal warriors and zombies, but they're still quite capable of taking you on in a fight. So that is going to be a problem. Volkmar is pretty much a cakewalk, though you may want to avoid declaring war on him because, well, tic-tac-toe exists, and tic-tac-toe is very aggressive when it comes to his campaign actions. Like any factions that start here, Volkmar, Manfred, etc., they generally tend to have war declared on them by tic-tac-toe. And tic-tac-toe is a particular annoyance for you as the Tomb Kings because your ranged options aren't necessarily the best. Yes, you have skeletal archers, but they're not going to be able to stand up to the pterodons that tic-tac-toe is going to be able to bring. So your army in a battle against tic-tac-toe is going to take quite a bit of damage. By the way, your campaign goal should be to take the entirety of the Land of the Dead. Try and avoid fighting Skarbrand for a while. Take Kasabar, take the Shifting Sands, and maybe take out the Land of the Dervishes. You don't necessarily need the Land of the Dervishes, though there's certainly some benefits in having Sundenberg, all that. At one point, you will also want to get the Black Pyramid of Nagash. Once you've secured your core territory here, you want to head over into the Cracked Land, take that over, take all of it over, and then take the Great Desert of Araby. And then you want to take the Great Desert of Araby and trade it to Rapance. This may very well make her your vassal. I'm not joking on this. I've done this several times, playing as Settra. Hell, playing even as Archon. I've taken the Great Desert of Araby from the Ogres and traded it to Rapance, and it counts for so much diplomatically that she will almost certainly become your vassal, unless you've already declared war on her. So try and avoid doing that, and instead make her your vassal, because she might give you a good amount of income, support troops. She can be very useful in that respect. Or you could just wipe her out and take this entire province for yourself. Maybe make a deal instead with the dwarves over here of the Greybeard Prospectors, because you can't really hold the mountains yourself. It's not suitable terrain. And most of the money you're going to spend in the campaign are going to be spent on infrastructure, so that 30% construction cost on buildings is something you want to avoid. But eventually you are going to end up in a war with Archon. Now, Archon has more armies than you, and he has more units than you. That's because he can get more unit recruitment types from the very start. Like, he has a structure in the Wizard Palace that gives him 4 unit capacity group ghouls, direwolves, felbats. So what you might do instead of just rushing over to the west, though it is a fight you can win, what you might do after you've taken the Land of the Dead and maybe Kasabar you might want to head over to Lamia. There is a Book of Nagash in Lamia, and in this case, for instance, it's the best Book of Nagash you could get in Lamia because it gives you that one army capacity that you so desperately need: Tomb Guards with halberds, and skeletal chariots. Like you want the 5th Book of Nagash to start out close to you. So the books themselves, the locations of the books are randomized whenever you start a campaign. So if you can get the 5th book here in Lamia, that's probably your best bet. I mean, you could consider getting it here in this rogue army would be a good idea. But this rogue army is incredibly powerful, especially when you only have one army. And getting a book in Lamia is the ideal scenario. The reason for that is while, yes, you can increase army capacity from a dynasty, it will also slow down your research rate. So what you'd like to do in a campaign when it comes to dynasties, you would like to start researching. I'd probably recommend the 1st dynasty, or probably, I think it is the 5th, the 4th actually. So either the 1st or the 4th. The 1st will give you benefits to Nehekara warriors and chariots units, which you're going to want to get a lot of. And then the 4th gives you benefits to Tomb Guards. So those are the first 2 dynasties you want to get. So what you do is you start researching the 1st dynasty. You get it almost done to completion, 1 turn away from completion. Then you start researching the 4th dynasty. Unless you desperately need a 2nd army. But it is the best possible choice to just almost finish the dynasty if you can afford it in a campaign. Settra is the one that can least afford it of all the Tomb King's legendary lords, because his army is not that strong to begin with, and he's got a lot of foes that can outnumber him by a vast amount. So you getting a 2nd army, etc., is very important in your campaign. But you might also decide to rely on getting it through canopic jars, like getting a new dynasty through the canopic jars. So that's a lot of canopic jars that you will require in order to do it. By the way, take the Lance Dead, take the fight with Manfred, then go over here in Carrick-Orund. If you trade this to Forik, you might be able to at least get military access, if not, or at the very least, non-aggression pack. So take Carrick-Orund, take the Granite Massive, take the settlements here, and eventually just give them to Khalida in exchange for maybe vassalization, or in the best possible scenario, or at least a military alliance. She will value getting Lamia by quite a lot. Then take Lamia for yourself. Khalida can be a great ally. Take Lamia for yourself, get the book, then give it to Khalida. Trade it away to Khalida, and then leave Khalida be. Hopefully as an ally in this campaign. And after that, start heading west. Maybe deal with Volkmar at this particular point. If he hasn't already declared war, you take the Crackland, take the Great Desert of Araby. By this point, if you've gone over to Lamia first, by this point, Rapans and Arcana are probably already engaged in a war, and maybe even the dwarves here in the Vulture Mountains have been wiped out. Like, if you delay going to the west from the very beginning, the dwarves might be wiped out, and you can make deals with the dwarves. What do you do after that? Well, your campaign victory conditions require you to hold some of these settlements, and I believe it's only something you can do if you control them directly. So getting some alliances, because it doesn't mention like through military allies or vassals. Yeah, the Tomb Kings are a bit selfish when it comes to their victory conditions. Like, it's annoying because they have a lot of diplomatic options, including the vassalization with a lot of factions, but they need to hold these settlements to achieve their long campaign victory condition. Though their long campaign victory condition is not necessarily going to give them the most important benefits. Even the short campaign victory condition, I would argue, is not too very significant. But long campaign, you do certainly want the pyramids for the various benefits that they will provide to you. So you do want to get access to them. So for instance here, if we're looking at this, if we're looking at the Great Pyramid of Settra, we get unit capacity for Tomb Guard, Halberd, Skeletal Chariots, Skeletal Archer Chariots, control in adjacent provinces. So it's pretty useful to get those pyramids as part of your campaign. What do you do after? Well, Tic-Tac-Toe is going to be an annoyance, so I would probably recommend wiping him out, though that might lead to a war with Krokgar. If you can make some kind of peace deal with Tic-Tac-Toe, that would be best, but let me be blunt on this. I've played the campaign, etc. No peace agreement with Tic-Tac-Toe is going to last. Probably the same situation with Krokgar, though it's Tic-Tac-Toe that's far more aggressive. After that, you might want to head north and take the Barrier Idols, the Marshes of Madness. Yes, it is very annoying to navigate the Marshes of Madness. Your army is going to be significantly slowed down. But if you can secure all of this territory, you're going to have a pretty powerful empire, continuously heading to the north into the Dwarven land. So you can't occupy the mountains. You can make deals with the Dwarves. Just bear in mind that there are certainly some settlements, like Arcade Peaks, that you're going to want to take over yourself for the book, and then go over then go over into Sylvania to take the Book of Nagash over there. You might go to war with the entirety of the Empire by this point. The most annoying books, by the way, are the ones in Wolf 1. So let me get this straight, what Creative Assembly is thinking when it comes to the Books of Nagash. I get it, this is from Warhammer 2, translated in Warhammer 3. The translation sucks. The problem is, taking the White Tower of Hoeth means declaring war on Tyrion. Tyrion consistently becomes one of the most powerful bloody factions in the campaign, and you're supposed to invade Ulthuan from here all the way to here. To call that madness is not doing the war justice, I'd argue. The biggest problem, though, in Settra's campaign, I'd argue, is the limitation on terrain. Though, to be fair, if you do capture a lot of territory and you get vassals as well, because that's one of the main things you can do as the Tomb Kings. You can get vassals. So, in a campaign I played as Settra, I was able to get Rapance as a vassal, and Forgrim even as a vassal. Like, I was able to make some really good deals with both of them. And they'll help you out with your armies. They'll boost your income by a substantial amount. Like, the one thing to mention about the Tomb Kings is you basically have no background income. You're only reliant on building income, and it's going to be very low. You're generally not going to have financial issues in your campaign, because with free armies, no upkeep, no supply lines, nothing like that, your net income is actually going to be greater than many other factions, provided you do end up taking a lot of territory. That's the crux of the issue for the Tomb Kings. You do need to take a huge amount of territory to be effective. It is a pretty painful campaign early on, especially, but if you do win that early game situation, you can steamroll a lot of the map. You certainly do have a lot of advantages, but you are going to have your work cut out for you. But Settra is capable in a lot of ways of going on a global tour, if you will. The biggest problem is just the amount of terrain types that he can't take. Like, if we look at the faction screen, you can take Wasteland, Savanna, and Desert. And the problem is the vast majority of the deserts are over here in your starting territory. Savanna is not that common necessarily as a territory. There's only a handful of regions and provinces that have Savanna. And yes, Wasteland does include the Badlands and the entirety of the Darklands, but you should never want to go into the Darklands. That's just asking for it. Like, imagine going to the Darklands, going to war against Emmerich, Gorst, Grimgor. That's not exactly a great campaign plan. I mean, if you want the challenge in the middle-late game, sure, go for it. They might be the only ones that can provide that challenge, but it can be also a pretty painful experience. Also, bear in mind that you do have quite a few endgame crises next to you. So, one next to the Black Pyramid of Nagash, one at Casa Bar, one at Forek, one with the Wood Elves. Like, this is what's so insane about Settra. He doesn't even get a break in the very, very late stages of the game, because if you enable the Ultimate Game Crisis, you're going to have 4 freaking endgame crises spawning right next to your starting province. That is pretty absurd when it comes down to it. And generally speaking, even if you're going for a regular endgame crisis, chances are quite high that you're going to get at least one. You're going to get one spawning next to you. And that can be a problem. Though the Wood Elf one, the Wood Elf endgame crisis over here in the Orient's camp would be pretty easy to deal with. Anyway, that's all there is to say. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications, and I'll see you boys and girls next time.